And welcome to the bi-monthly Industry 4.0 Community Podcast. I am your host, Walker D. Reynolds. It is Tuesday, March 7th, and this podcast is hosted by 4.0 Solutions. Our guests, Vaughn and Zach are back doing the regular thing every other week. But this week we have Kudzai Manditereza from Industry 4.0 TV and HiveMQ. We will be bringing him in shortly. We're going to talk about his journey in IIoT. We're going to be talking about the Arduino Opta. We're going to talk a little bit about Tesla Investor Days. We got a great conversation that we're going to have. What I think the real meat and potatoes is going to be, we're going to be talking about MQTT. We're going to be talking about Sparkplug and where he and I both think this should go. And I have no idea where he thinks it should go. We're going to have that conversation today. But quick announcements, real quick. Those of you who are in the Mastermind program, our next session is this Friday, March 10th at 8 o'clock. For those of you who are not in Mastermind and Mentorship and you hear us talk about it all the time, Mentorship is our program at IoT.University where we train engineers on how to support Industry 4.0 projects, all the technical skills that go into being a digital transformation engineer or specialist. Mastermind is where we teach the leaders and the solutions architects on how to lead digital transformation, how to write strategy, how to write architecture, minimum technical requirements. What we're doing this year, we're in our third year of the program, and many of the people who are in the program, it just continues to grow. The people, our churn rate's actually really, really low. I think it's like 5%. So 1 in 20 drops at the end of a year. So we have a really low churn rate. We have lots of really advanced people in the programs. So what we're doing this year is we're digitally transforming a virtual factory. So, and the two groups are actually working together. The Mastermind group is our product owners and our Scrum Masters, and the Mentorship group are our actual developers. And this is actually our first sprint review, which we'll be doing this Friday. We'll be doing the sprint review on the initial simulation namespace that was built by the mentees last month. For those of you who are in mentorship, the next mentorship session is next Friday, March 17th at 9 o'clock. Excuse me. Those of you who are in the Chat GPT for Digital Transformation Workshop, that's March 23rd at 10 o'clock in the morning. You can still sign up for that at IoT.University. We're going to basically be teaching how to leverage Chat GPT as a lever for speeding up your digital transformation tasks. I can tell you this right now, if you're not doing it, you're making a huge mistake. There's no way you're going to be able to compete with someone who is leveraging ChatGPT in their professional daily lives. So we're going to talk about how to optimize code and how to use it to write specifications and all that kind of stuff. Core MES Bootcamp, session number 7 was this past Saturday. We uploaded to the repository the MES. Josh, will you throw up the screenshot of the MES system? So for those of you who are in Core MES, the Core MES Bootcamp has, we actually built a Core MES system with all the students in there. I think it was 180 students total were in the program. We uploaded all the MES system, the database backup, all the instructions, documentation up to the repository. A quick reminder for those of you who are in that program, there are 4 technical tasks that you were given at the end of the last session, things that you needed to fix, okay? Things that you need to repair in the system so that we could test your technical skill. Those are in the instructions in the repository, okay? So if you read the instructions, it has the 4 things that you need to do. In 2 weeks, we will upload the fixed copy to the repository so that you can compare your work with the way it should actually look. And then for those of you who want to move on to the advanced MES bootcamp, that starts in April. There's going to be 3 sessions. You guys should hear a big announcement about this. Basically, advanced MES bootcamp, you'll be able to get all 3 sessions for one price, I think, or you can buy the individual sessions separately. The 2 big topics that we're going to cover is how to merge ERP and MES together. And I think we're going to be doing that in session 2. So how do you take, say, a BAPI from an ERP system and its namespace and master data model and merge that together with an MES namespace, and including the structures, the definitions, the instances, and all the events? How do you merge those 2 together in one namespace so that you can then transmit that to a higher level, taking things like, say, the master ID, the ID from a CMMS system, or the asset ID that lives in the ERP, and how do you reconcile that with the ID of that same asset inside of a MES system, right? These are really common technical issues you run into during digital transformation that no one ever teaches you about. So we're going to be doing ERP and MES conversion, I think, in the second session. And then in the third session, we're going to be covering a couple of different topics. But the big one is going to be, how do you take your namespace? How do you stream that into the cloud? And how do you develop a basic linear regression to predict the future from one of your KPIs? Okay. All right. With that, that's all the announcements. We'll go ahead and bring in Kudzai, Zach, and Vaughn. What's up, gang? How's it going?
Hey. It's going well. Hey, I got a question on that the boot camp.
Yeah.
Because I didn't catch it. Like, so I'm assuming, like, if you're a part of the mastermind program, is that kind of like you get access to all of these different workshops and courses, or are they a la carte, or how does that work?
Yeah, so everybody who was in Mastermind, they got Core MES Bootcamp. So not everyone in Mastermind just did Core MES, but then other people could buy the Core MES program. So they could purchase it a la carte. But if you were in Mastermind, you got Core MES.
And what about the Chat GPT workshop coming up?
That's totally standalone. Totally standalone. In fact, the lesson that I'm doing in the Chat GPT workshop is a lesson I already did in Mastermind. It's a bigger lesson. It's a much longer lesson, but I already did the Chat GPT lesson in Mastermind.
Got it.
So one of the things that we're working on at IoT.University is most of the content, most of the programs that we develop, if you're in the Mastermind program, you generally get everything, but you don't always get everything. It's all dependent upon whether we think that thing that we're developing is technical or non-technical, because Mastermind is a non-technical program. If, let's say, you're an accountant who's been brought into digital transformation, we focus more on the leadership aspects, design, architecture, strategy. That's what we do in Mastermind. And then we don't teach technical skills, but we talk about technical concepts. So if there's a program where we're teaching technical skills, we generally don't include that in Mastermind. With Core MES, we did, for the people who had technical skills. And I think in Mastermind, we have like 180 members, something like that. And about 100 of them have technical skills. So about 100 of them participated in the Core MES. So, cool. Good question, though. So Kudzai Manditereza, that's how you pronounce it, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. Why don't you quickly, for our audience, everybody knows you, Industry 4.0 TV. You just did a great blog series on unified namespace for HiveMQ. Absolutely loved it. It was awesome. Most people know who you are. You're on other podcasts and stuff. But for those people who don't know who you are, why don't you quickly, who are you? Where do you live? What do you do? Kind of what's your background?
Okay. So first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here. It's really an honor to be part of this conversation. So yeah, for all those that don't know me, I'm Kudzai Manditereza. I'm currently a developer advocate at HiveMQ, and I'm the founder of Industry 4.0 TV. So as Walker said, I run a podcast session. I also do some tutorial videos focusing on industrial IoT. I've got a background in industrial system integration. So I'm originally from Zimbabwe, graduated with a degree in electronic engineering. And then I moved to South Africa after college. So this is where I spent the better part of my professional career in South Africa. So I started out in the embedded systems design space, working with things like your PIC microcontrollers, 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit. And that was in the mining industry. So basically building some gas detection instruments and some data logging tools, like kind of like interfacing software with some embedded systems. And at times, like kind of like pushing that data to the internet. And so my experience really with industrial automation started about 2 years after graduating from college. So this is where I joined a small system integration company in South Africa. In fact, it was a distributor for Opta 22, which is really kind of what really attracted me, because I was really kind of like more on the C coding like kind of guy, so I was never really into ladder logic. So when I actually discovered that there's a platform, actually that was before I even joined this system integration company. I was kind of like investigating about PLCs, and then only to find out that a lot of them, they're kind of like really expensive. You can't buy something that you can play around with. I was used to playing around with Arduino and things like that. So I came across Opta 22 programmable automation controllers. That was like the snap packs way before they had the Groove Epic and stuff. So like as fate would have it, I would actually then meet this Opta 22 distributor distributing the same programmable automation controllers. So I really kind of fell in love with the fact that I can literally just write scripting languages on a PLC. So that really what drew me into that. So I fell in love with Opta 22, building some automation systems, mostly for small batch plants, manufacturing.
So this is based on you were talking somewhere between like 2008, 2012, something like that, in that range.
Yeah, so 2012, 2013.
Okay,
right?
got it. All right,
Yeah,
good.
yeah. So this is when I was kind of like working with these systems. So as you would know, Opta 22 is like programmable automation controllers are not that popular in the industry. So maybe they're kind of like starting to gain traction. So one of the things that really like stood out for me the moment I started working in the industrial automation space was like how difficult it is to get data out of. Like for me, that was just like ridiculous, right? So like, how do you operate? Just seeing people moving around with pen and paper, for me, that was like something that showed me that this is an industry that is really ripe for change,
Yes.
So that's the when I started to kind of like investigate, how data integration technologies. This is where I came across things like OPC UA. That was before I really discovered MQTT, right? So OPC UA, and then I kind of like, because no one was talking about MQTT
Right.
back then. Like that was like
No,
OPC
I mean that,
UA,
and in fact, at that time, 2012, like the real big announcement for MQTT was in 2013, 14. Like I think Arlen's first, like its big coming out was ICC in 2014. I'm pretty sure it may have been 13, and he presented to a packed room, and he integrated. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember. I think it was 500 PLCs in 10 seconds. He did and it was a room, a packed house, and I was in that room, and I went. The moment he did it, I was like, "Whoa!" Like everything just changed. That I've been waiting for this, right? It was like, yeah, that time. Most people just don't understand that MQTT, even though it was invented in 98, 99, 2000. It didn't become an industrial player, even though it was developed as an industrial protocol. It was Facebook who was using it like in Messenger and stuff before. And then all of a sudden, Arlen and CirrusLink, even though Arlen's the inventor of MQTT, it took him creating CirrusLink as a company to develop the actual modules for industrial companies to be able to use the integration. And then it just sort of, everything just changed. I mean, it just, now 9 years later or whatever, we've hit critical mass. This is all anyone talks about. But yeah. So you went OPCUA, and then you got introduced to MQTT later on down the road. When did you start Industry 4.0 TV, and why?
So for me, it was a way of really kind of like learning by teaching, right? So that was just a way of teaching myself, right? Because there wasn't really any material out there that was like kind of like addressing industrial IoT. Of course, until I discovered 4.0 solutions, that was like Intellic integration back then, right? Your channel. And there wasn't really a lot of content out there like that really like technical content that showed you exactly how to kind of like work with these systems. So as a way of kind of like teaching myself these things, so I kind of like started writing articles. So it was articles back then. I didn't have the idea of like building Industry 4.0 TV. So I was kind of like writing articles. So I remember I wrote my first article on MQTT. That was 2015, somewhere around there. So like, cause when I discovered MQTT after having played around with OPCU and stuff like that, when I discovered MQTT, for me it was like it was a mind-blowing experience, right?
Yeah.
To say like, it's like, I mean, there must be something here. Do you mean that I can just like redefine a topic like dynamically and send data? That's it, nothing more to do. Like that simplicity for me was something that really amazed me. So this is where then I kind of like started to investigate more about MQTT. So back then it was mostly articles. So I wrote a lot of articles and then did a few videos here and there. And turns out that it resonated, right, with a lot of people. So maybe it's because of the same fact.
Including me, by the way. So, I mean,
yeah.
I know lots of content, but I'll say this. The two content creators who I appreciate the most in the industry, when people ask me, hey, Walker, what content do you watch in our industry? I watch a lot because I just want to know what people are talking about, and, you know, and do I agree with what people are saying, and should I, you know, but there's two people whose content I absolutely love. I love yours, and I've been watching you since 2018, 2019 religiously, 2019, I think. And Tim Wilborn, right? So I love the work Tim Wilborn does. I love the work you do. And so when people ask me, I always recommend the two of you. And what's interesting is when a vendor comes to me and a vendor says, and by the way, this is the first time Kudzai and I are ever really meeting, right? I mean, I think we've messaged before through LinkedIn or whatever, but this is the first time we're ever really meeting. And whenever a vendor contacts me and they're like, oh, is there anybody else we should talk to? I say, oh, you should definitely reach out to Kudzai. You should definitely reach out to Tim Wilborn. And I've never spoken to Tim Wilborn in my life, just like through Twitter. Same thing. Like, you guys are creators that I really love and enjoy watching. And I've been watching you religiously since 2019 for sure. So, but the OPCU MQTT thing. So one of the things that we talk about is, this is a conversation I think the community wants to hear. So your role, right? So you still do Industry 4.0 TV, and then you're at HiveMQ now, right?
Yes.
You're based in Munich. You're at HiveMQ. What brought you to HiveMQ? How did that happen? And what is it you do there?
So like I explained before, I kind of like fell in love with MQTT. So I was most of the time creating content around MQTT every other day. And then I met Dominic, like the co-founder of HiveMQ, and then we kind of like we connected on LinkedIn, and then we I think it was a guest at some point on my podcast. So I was already creating content around MQTT and OPCUA, by the way. So and then from there, I started working as a freelance, right? So creating content for the HiveMQ website, right? So for me, that initial decision to really kind of like start working with HiveMQ, first of all, is like the company has got a culture of education. So as you would know, they've got like the most popular MQTT series, right? So that's, for me, was the first positive sign of joining HiveMQ, the idea of like teaching. So as you would know, in our industry, this culture of just educating without expecting something in return is
rare.
Unheard of, right?
It's very rare. Yeah.
Very rare. Right. So for me, that was the first really thing that drove me to HiveMQ, that value of educating the community. And also the fact that I was already doing MQTT. So it's something that I believe in and still believe in, by the way. So being a part of something that is driving MQTT, which I believe is a standard that is really currently something that is poised to change the industry, it was also a no-brainer for me. So I really wanted to be part of something. So at HiveMQ, I'm a developer advocate. So I create content, right? So basically, I do the same thing that I was doing for Industry 4.0 TV, but now I'm doing it under HiveMQ, right? So basically showing MQTT, sometimes.
And for those of you who haven't already read it, Josh will be pasting in the chat a link to the UNS Essentials that Kudzai did. I think it was a 3-part series, right? Yeah. So he did a 3-part series on the UNS Essentials, and I shared it on LinkedIn and stuff. Outstanding primer. That is, I mean, if I had wrote it myself, I would have written it exactly the same way. So, I mean, he absolutely nailed it. He hit a home run on the, and I highly recommend anyone to go to that link, go to the HiveMQ's website and read the UNS Essentials, that 3-part series, because that'll give you the framework, the foundation. I currently am writing a book on the unified namespace. So and the goal is, I think we're going to try and give it away for free. I think we're just going to give it away. And it'll just basically be, where did the UNS come from? I'm going to talk about the history of when I started developing the unified namespace in the mid 2005 in a salt mine. Actually, the very first UNS, most people don't know this, the very first unified namespace under this architecture that we're talking about was developed in 2005 in a salt mine. And it was, my goal was to unify all data and information in our mine and on surface in one location. So from Stamler, which is where they're dropping in the raw material and breaking up the rock, to the screen plant, to the hoists, to the surface, to the pads. And that was all Data Highway Plus. The original unified namespace was built using dynamic data exchange, DDE, the same topic namespace that you can build like in an Excel spreadsheet using DDE. That's how it was originally built. It didn't move. It went to OPC after that, and then it moved to MQTT once MQTT came out. And now that's when it really just sort of blew up. But so at HiveMQ, you're a developer advocate. Are you doing any like sales engineering, or are you, is your primary focus to educate developers?
Yeah, absolutely. So mine is a really community focused role. So it's mainly about educating the community around MQTT, Sparkplug, and of late the unified namespace. And obviously, kudos to you. I mean, the unified namespace didn't like make sense to me right away. I've been listening to you for years, just kind of like pounding on you, and I was like, what is this guy talking about? So I was like kind of trying to absorb a lot of these things, and then it started to really make sense as I kind of like understood all the different protocols, all the limitations of OPC UA, all the kind of the powers of MQTT, Sparkplug. And then so I didn't have the tools to kind of like imagine it first, but as soon as I gathered all the knowledge, it started to make sense. And when I understood it, it made like sense. It was like an obvious thing to do for me. Like I didn't understand how you could really do it any other way. So that's why it's something that has really resonated with me since, and I've decided to kind of like really focus on that more at HiveMQ as well.
I tell this story all the time. I was at the ARC show so the ARC advisory group they do a show in Orlando every year. It's the beginning of the year, January, February, whatever. And so I went out there a few years ago. John McLeod flies out. He's doing his normal thing. I hate those types of shows. I'm not a fan of crowds and that kind of stuff. So he calls me and he says, you need to come out here. So I catch a flight late. I come out for the last day, and I run into John Rinaldi from Real Time Automation, right? He sits on the user group at the OPC Foundation. John is a fucking legend in our industry. I mean, he, in terms of protocol converters, and I mean, there's very few people in our industry who know as much about industrial protocols than John Rinaldi does. I mean, in fact, I don't know anyone who knows more than John does. So if there's somebody out there, I'd love to meet them. So Rinaldi and John he was like the precursor to us, right? He'd send out a newsletter, and it was the Real Time Automation Industrial newsletter. And he would send it out, I think it was in December. And I ran the previous December, so 2 months earlier, he had sent out his newsletter. And in that newsletter, it was, MQTT is not everything it's cracked up to be. It's not the future of industry, blah, 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 right? So I go out and I meet John at the ARC advisory show. We sit down and I have a great conversation with him. And we go back and forth on MQTT versus OPC. And I said to John, same thing with you. I said, John, I have absolutely no doubt you're going to come around. Like, I don't have any doubt that as you dive a little deeper into it, you're going to come around, right? And I promise you. And sure enough, like a year later, he posts this mea culpa on LinkedIn. He says, I was wrong. MQTT is everything it's cracked up to be, you know. And what I've said is what you just said right there, how you didn't really, you know, once you got it, you got it. Like once it clicked, it was like once you saw everything, it just became so self-evident, right? I've heard that so many times, you know. And so why do we have IoT.University? Why did we create a YouTube channel? All of it was centered around, the real problem is education. The problem isn't that people aren't smart or that the technology isn't there. It's that we haven't connected the smart people with the technology through education, because that's one of the problems in our industry. So how are you, when you shoot content, when I shoot content, I ask 3 questions. Well, I asked 4 really. Why should anyone listen to me? Number 1. But the first thing is, what do I want to say? What am I going to say in this content? Number 2, what will my audience hear? Because oftentimes those are 2 different things. And the third thing is, what will they say is the most valuable thing I said about in this content? When you go and shoot content, when you go out to say something, how do you decide what you're going to say and how you're going to say it?
Yeah, so I think for me, really, it starts with kind of like just understanding, listening to what the community really is looking for, what the community really is struggling with, right? Once I identify this, and then this is where I kind of like follow more or less your process to say, okay, what is it that I'm going to say about this topic, and how am I going to deliver this, and what's the key message that I hope like someone would take away from this? That's something that is really critical. So at the end of this video, this is the key that I hope someone takes away from this, that addresses those pain points that I would have identified within the community. So it's pretty much, more or less the same. Like your process.
HiveMQ as a broker. This is a question I wanted to ask. I wasn't sure I was going to ask it, but so you've been there long enough now where you had a chance to really, really kick the tires. So I want to say a couple of things to just the general community. You guys hear me talk about brokers all the time. The 2 gold standards in MQTT brokers out there right now, you have HiveMQ and you have EMQx, right? HiveMQ comes out of Europe, EMQx comes out of China. A year ago, you guys heard me talk about that. I benchmarked both of them. I have relationships with both companies. I took a look, and everyone would ask me, which one should I use? The answer is you can't go wrong with either of them. But the answer is a little more complicated than that. Companies that don't trust the Chinese are obviously not going to use EMQx, right? There is a real concern about EMQx and the China connection. Even though EMQx is really run in the United States and California, it's the Chinese connection that makes people really concerned about it, right? And you know, that's a real thing here in the United States. Whether it's justified or not, those fears are there. Then in the complaint about HiveMQ is cost, right? HiveMQ is the entry level cost is too high, right? So what I did was I just threw both of that aside and I benchmarked the 2 platforms. So I just said, which one is the most performant, has the best features, all kind of stuff. And in the end, they were both pretty close. EMQx was more performant initially. One of the things I wanted to say is that's no longer the case, because I did just complete my new benchmark with the latest release of HiveMQ. You guys announced, I don't remember how many tags it was, 100 million topics, right? It was a 100 million topic benchmark, million. Which, by the way, that's never happened before. So that is a groundbreaking announcement that HiveMQ made within the last month or 6 weeks, that they had an enterprise implementation with 100 million topics. That's never been the highest I'd ever seen before. That was about 50. Okay. So it's literally doubled the benchmark. So HiveMQ now is the most performant broker on the planet. So and I'll have the final results. EMQx versus HiveMQ looks like it's about 18 to 19% more performant HiveMQ is than EMQx as it stands today. But now that you've been there for a little while now, what's something you would want the community to know about HiveMQ that you don't think they do know?
So I think the most important thing really about the HiveMQ broker is something that you kind of like take for granted. I think maybe what you call, I think Rick calls them the ELTs, right? Things like reliability, availability, and so on and so forth. So those are the things that it's easy to take for granted when you just want to kind of like get started and you just want to put a broker and get going. But as soon as you want to scale your system out, this is where you kind of like really realize that, okay, I really need something that is can handle that scale. I mean, to your point, we demonstrated like the 200 million connections recently, which is how much this broker could scale. And so that's the most important thing. And also just the clustering technology is something that is also really not very known out there. The ability to really kind of like replicate that data to make sure that not even a single message is lost, right? To kind of replicate all of the data across all the different nodes. And it's done in such a robust manner. So even myself, when I discover all of these things, I was just using a broker and I didn't really kind of pay much attention to what goes on behind this.
Because when you're dealing with 100 topics or 1,000 topics, it's not a big, you got one connection with 1,000 topics. It's not a big deal, right? I mean, but what we're talking about is thousands of nodes, tens of thousands of nodes, all connected into the same infrastructure, and you're dealing with topics in the millions, right? And most people can't fathom, what kind of throughput, how fast, a piece of software has to run to be able to even handle that, right? I mean, you almost can justify, you're a hardware guy, right? You can almost justify writing a broker in machine code so that you can get that performance, right? You could almost justify doing it in machine code to get that level of performance as opposed to running it through some type of interpreter or going the compiled route. But a couple of things I wanted to revert back to, which is we talked about digital transformation here. One of the things we're going to do right now is we're going to play like a 3 or 4 minute clip from Tesla's Investor Day. Okay, but I wanted to talk about a little bit, kind of lay the foundation. I want to get Kudzai's reaction to this video here, and then I'll give mine as well. A lot of people will ask me, why digital transformation? Like, why do I need to digitally transform? And at the end of the day, the answer is really quite simple. It's just so you can stay in business. Like, I mean, that's just the baseline. Is if you're not a digital company, if you're not digital in 2030, you won't even exist. We won't even be talking about you. Okay. If you're not digital today, it's going to be really hard to catch up. Like if you don't already have your digital strategy, you're pretty much in a lot of trouble. Okay. One of the things that we talk about, we have this digital transformation maturity assessment. We look at digital maturity of companies. And I know that HiveMQ does the exact same thing. When you guys go in and take a look at an organization, you're trying to gauge the maturity level of that organization in terms of digital, right? Do they have the right strategy, the right leadership, the right mentality? Do they have the IT infrastructure, right? The whole deal. The most mature company on the planet for the last 6 years has been Tesla. Okay, Tesla is about 4 percentage points higher. Their score is an 86 out of 100 on the digital transformation maturity scale. That's out of 1,380 something companies globally in our data set. The next closest company is 4 points behind them at 82. The next closest company after that is in the low 70s. The next closest company after that is in the 60s. And then everyone else is clustered in the mid 50s. If you look at that bell curve. Okay. And people will ask me, how can you say that about Tesla? And what I'm going to play in this video here, I'm going to play a clip that's going to prove my point. Okay. This is from Tom Zhu, who is Tesla's not very good at job titles, but in a nutshell, he's second in command at Tesla. He was in charge. He was basically CEO of Tesla China. And now he's in charge of all manufacturing and sales in North America and Canada. He's going to be, doing Giga Mexico and all that stuff. I'm going to play this audio clip, and then we're going to talk about here's why you have to digitally transform, because you're competing against companies who can achieve this. Okay, here we go.
So what it takes to ramp a Gigafactory? Well, if you have 600 robots, 10,000 trained employees, or 5,000 human and 5,000 Optimus, and hundreds of processes, you can do it. Sounds simple, but it's extremely hard. So there's 2 key metrics that we predominantly focused on. It is the overall equipment effectiveness and the cycle time. In Tesla, we're setting the passing grade for our vehicle factories with 90% OEE and 45-second cycle time.
All right, I'm going to stop right there. Okay. In case you couldn't hear, Tom Zhu said that they are setting their target, acceptable overall equipment effectiveness, at 90%. Okay. Okay.
Like a real 90%.
90% never fucking happens. There's no company out there with 90% OEE unless they're pencil whipping it. Okay. When you implement all the MES people who are on here right now know that when you deploy a digital MES system, most companies find out that their OEE is somewhere in the 30s to 40s. That one of the first things they learn is that they're in the 30 to 40% OEE range. And oftentimes it takes them 18 months to get into the 70s. Okay. Nobody gets to the 90s. Nobody. And Tesla's OEE standard, that is acceptable level, 90%. All right, let's continue with the piece here.
What that means, the OEE really evaluates the equipment uptime, the machine performance, and the quality. Simply put, this is the actual production time on a good quality product versus the planned productive time. The higher, the better. 45-second cycle time, that means you expect every 45 seconds there's a car running off the final assembly line in the factory. And the faster we ramp, the faster we can get to economy of scale. If you look at the chart on the right, on the left, Shanghai be able to significantly drop our labor hours per car.
Josh, go ahead and share that chart while we play this.
During the ramp, the little dip there has happened in the last Q2 2022 because of the COVID shutdown. And on the right is the Fremont Model Y shop. Even this is a 6-year-old facility, the team there still be able to optimize the material flow, eliminate all the single point of failure, and drive higher output, hence reduce the labor hours. And actually, this factory keeps setting a new record. Yesterday, they just had a new factory daily record.
Congrats, Fremont team.
All right, real quick. So keep that chart up, Josh. Okay. And I'm going to bring Kudzai in here. Number one, it's not possible for Tesla to do what they've done here. So they're doing two things. On the left, the chart on the left-hand side is showing Shanghai's output. There's two numbers on here. Number one is the light gray line is their labor hours, and the blue line is their output. So labor hours continue to go down and their output continues to go up. There was a big initiative in the second quarter of 2022 to drive these efficiency improvements. But doing that drive required that they were a fully digital company. That means everything was connected together. They were acquiring the data so that they could calculate the KPIs accurately and in real time so that they could drive these efficiency improvements.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And if you, for anyone listening on the podcast, what you can't see is the Model Y output at Shanghai. They're able to produce more cars with less labor hours than the Fremont factory is able to do. So
Correct.
They're able to do more with less on the second gen factory. Imagine the third gen factory.
There's another piece in here that's hard for people to understand, and that is this. Earlier on in the presentation, so most people, if you looked at the media, the way they talked about Tesla's investor day, they were like, oh, Tesla's lost all their great ideas. There was a big letdown. Bullshit. There were 3 major announcements in there that should scare the shit out of every automotive manufacturer on the planet. Number one, Tesla goes from bare ground to operating gigafactory in 9.5 months. Bare ground to operating facility in 9.5 months. Number two, once they've ramped up so that they have sustainable production, and then they decide to do their secondary ramp where they improve efficiency, increase output, and lower labor costs, they are unmatched on the planet, not just in automotive, but in all of industry. And it's not even close. And it's not even remotely achievable unless you are a full stack digital company. Part of the reason you can't achieve these types of gains without being able to scale data acquisition, storage, analysis, and transformation into information. And products like HiveMQ, technology like MQTT makes all of that possible at scale. That's the big thing. But Kudzai, when you hear that piece, when you hear Tom Zhu talk about that, what is your reaction? And I know MES is not your, like, you're a hardware guy, and then you're a topology guy at the top end. But what is your reaction to that video?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, for me, like for any system, really, for any system that operates at 90% efficiency, regardless it's an MES system or an energy conversion system, that's like really operating at maximum capacity, because in most cases it's impossible to get to 100. So those are unavoidable losses. So it's safe to say that Tesla is running at 100% capacity as it is right now, right? Yeah. Which is mind-boggling for me, and also kind of like comparing it with the figure that you said at 30%, because I was about to ask what's the normal operating range for OEE, and you compare it with 30%, that is like really
most companies, when they get to 50% OEE, and for those of you, there's two numbers. There's a big discussion on LinkedIn right now. I can't remember the guy's name who said OEE is not the number you should worry about. You should worry about the sub KPIs, availability, quality, performance, and then you should really focus on asset utilization. My response to that is that's not true. OEE and TEEP are two numbers that are very, very valuable the higher you get up in the organization. And availability, quality, performance, and asset utilization, those are numbers that are more and more valuable as you get down lower in the organization. If I work on the plant floor, I don't care about the OEE number. If I work in maintenance, I really only care about the availability number. And if I work in operations, I only care about performance. And if I work in quality or engineering, I care about the quality number, right? So the closer you get to the plant floor, the more you care about the sub KPI, okay? But there's another number, and that's TEEP. OEE is how well do we perform when we're scheduled to perform. TEEP is how well are we performing relative to how well we could perform if we were operating at 100% capacity. We ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, minus all of our minimum downtime for like shutdowns and stuff. The reason I bring this up is Tesla is a fully digital company. They're not a car company. They're a data company that makes cars. And in order to be a data company, you got to be fully digital. In order to be fully digital, you have to have an infrastructure that scales, because so many things happen all day long. So many changes are made in an organization that if you had to manually connect every change to your infrastructure, you would never be able to keep up. And Tesla doesn't operate that way. You know, Tesla doesn't. Is Elon Musk the 21st century Henry Ford? No, Henry Ford is the 15th century Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Not even the 20th century Elon Musk. He's the 15th century Elon Musk.
I want to add in something. Remember, we were talking about, so it's relative to Investor Day, and like I totally forgot, but it just dawned on me. I was like, you know how we're talking about unified namespace and all data information is available to all consumers within the organization.
Yep.
And we knew Tesla was doing that, but in the Investor Day, under the financials section, they literally show like, hey, Tesla has their own operating system. I don't know if I could, let me share my screen real quick. I want to, hold on. All right, look, this is where it's later in the presentation, and they talked about scaling SG&A, like, hey, when you're selling vehicles, how do they keep their operating leverage so, profitable through their Tesla operating system, right? So here's the Tesla operating system: factory, warehousing, services, customer information, mobile app, finance, human resources, recruiting, data analysis.
Guess what's underneath that? So if you see the square on the outside of there's 9 slides there. Imagine those 9 elements were sitting on a piece of paper. Do you know what's on that piece of paper? A unified namespace. Built, edge-driven, report by exception, lightweight.
That's how they're able to transform their whole company.
That's exactly it.
And now we have actual acknowledgement from Tesla publicly. And everyone's like, there's no announcements in here. It's like, look at what they're doing. what
can't-
other company has created their own software program for, every other company is buying this off the shelf and trying to integrate it, with contractors. Tesla's doing this all in-house, from building to design and manufacturing, everything.
So, all right, real quick. So, which brings me, we're gonna come back to open IoT standards because I want to talk about, because I want to end the conversation with where Kudzai and I think, Kudzai, where do you think the MQTT standard should go? Where do you think the spark plug standard should go? What do you think's missing? What do you think's right about it? I mean, I think more and more we need to talk about this. This is I have this conversation with Rick Bellotta all the time. Rick is 1,000% right about when he talks about the limitations of spark plug. He hits the fucking nail on the head every time. He's 1,000% right. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the Arduino Opta. I want to make sure we talk about the Opta. All right. So I got you posted a few weeks ago. You got your Opta in house. I see it's on your board there behind you. I got my Arduino Opta yesterday. I have the Wi-Fi edition. I actually bought one the day, and then Arduino is actually sending me an evaluation as well. For those of you that don't know, the Arduino has a Pro line. Most people know it as Portenta. They know the Portenta part of the Pro line, but Arduino is making their way into the PLC market. Okay, and I'm shooting educational content on the Opta, specifically Wi-Fi, introducing you to it, the development environment. Here's the high level, and then I'm going to get into it because you've had a chance to play with it for a few weeks, and I want to kind of get your take on it. The Arduino, first off, I don't know how they're charging. Mine was $209 to the door. That's eight inputs, 4 outputs, I think. I'm not reading the specs, but I think it's 8 in, 4 out. I have the Wi-Fi module, over the air firmware updates, supports IEC 61131-3 programming, all the various programming languages. They have a new Arduino PLC IDE. You can program this PLC with either the standard Arduino IDE or with the PLC IDE. The software is free. You only got to pay your license by device. And it's $209 shipped to the door. Okay. What's crazy is this. And so people have been asking me, what's the Opta? What do you compare it to? Well, think of it in the family of Opta, Arduino Opta, then you have PLC next directly above that. And then you'll have the Opto 22 Groove Epic directly above that. And as you move up, you're getting more and more features, right? The Groove Epic is sort of the Rolls Royce, right? The PLC Next is your mid-level, and then this is your entry level, right? But you're going to be doing the same things. You're going to be doing process control and edge analytics and IoT projects using these PLCs, as opposed to like using a ControlLogix, Compact MicroLogix, where you're really doing process control, and that's basically it. I'm super excited. I just can't. First off, I don't know how they're making any money on it, and number two, I can't tell you. I haven't been this excited for a piece of hardware in a decade. I mean, it's crazy. But you've had a chance to play with it. So what are the 2 questions I think everybody wants to have answered is, number 1, are you impressed or not? And number 2, where do you see the best applications? You're a hardware guy. So where do you see the Arduino Opta fitting in terms of application for the standard digital transformation professional?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I'm really impressed, right? I mean, this is something that I don't know what took them so long. This is something that really made sense, really to really put out there. I've been expecting this maybe 5 years earlier or so, because just the productivity gains alone are just like really staggering. Just the ability to just go on to online, look up some libraries, some example code, or like communities, or you could like just write. I've been playing around with Arduino for the past 10 years or so, and mostly it's been on hobby projects. And I've always wished I could use all those skills, in a like real production environment. So that's why, really, for me, it's something that I'm genuinely excited about as you. And that was really impressive, right? And the platform itself, it's really interesting in the sense that you can program it, again, to your point, using like your Arduino Sketch and your IEC standard languages. Yeah, but what I think perhaps was going to happen the IEC is that's just my opinion, is going to be like a transition really, because eventually, right, everyone is really wanna use the sketch, right, because this is really what comes out naturally with a lot of young folk that are coming into the space here, which is really good because it gives you that ability to kind of like use the IEC languages and then also transition into the Arduino sketch, which is super powerful. I mean, if you've seen the amount of libraries that are out there for Arduino, it's just crazy what you could do with that one. So I mean, the fact that you've got half duplex Modbus TCP going down to your field devices, and you've also got your 8 channels inputs, and also on the other end you've got your Wi-Fi connectivity. It kind of like really sits there at the middle of IT OT integration. So I mean, things like your warehouse management stuff like asset tracking, because it's also got like a Bluetooth low energy, which means even moving equipment and stuff like that. So there's so much data integration capabilities on that little piece of device that you could do with it. So there's really so much that you could do as far as digital transformation is concerned.
So here's a use case. So in our test lab here, so I'm going to be shooting all the content. So what I'm using the Opta for in my first project. So I have a Chinese made rectifier used in like gold plating. So if you're familiar with any type of plating projects, you use a rectifier to, and basically electrolysis to essentially bond a gold plating to some underlying substrate, right? Use a rectifier to do that, right? And that's a DC powered rectifier. Generally, this one's made in China. It has a data sheet that gives its Modbus registers on it. So what I'm doing is I'm going to use the Opta to talk to this rectifier over Modbus. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert those registers into a Spark-Plug-B payload, which I'm then going to publish into an MQTT broker using the Arduino Opta. So I will be able to turn a dumb Modbus TCP device into a smart Spark-Plug-B device plugged into a digital infrastructure. That's what I'm going to be testing it with originally. The big thing that stands out to me, here's what I love, is the ability, because of Arduino Sketch, you're really coding on the device itself. And so you can write your own Spark-Plug-B program. You can turn a data structure into a Spark-Plug-B node inside and I've been doing this with ESPs and Arduino Unos, and I've been doing this in the past, but you don't do it at scale. I mean, you certainly don't do it at scale. What I'm doing is turning like a temperature sensor that's outside outside my bedroom into a spark plug node, doing that with an Arduino. But now I'm going to be able to do it for an industrial process, and really right now, the only other place you can do that is like on an Opto 22, on a Groove Epic, you can do that. Now the Groove Epic is natively spark plug, but you could still write a spark plug connector on an Opto 22 if you wanted to. But what are your plans on your board back there? Do you just have the demo project running in it, or have you done any development in that PLC? And if you have, what have you done? If you haven't, what is it you're going to do?
Yeah, so I haven't, but what I have there, I don't know if you can see. So I've got that one connected to a temperature and humidity sensor. So I'm just going to be like monitoring the temperature and humidity here in the lab. It's going to be talking over Modbus RTU, right, and then converting that into MQTT, and then publishing it into the HiveMQ. And also, I think also for me, I see it really as a useful tool for protocol translation. That's going to be like really useful for that.
I think the big thing for where I really see it initially, it's going to be people using Optas to demonstrate value of the infrastructure. I'm going to use an Opta in a small proof of concept because it's a small capital investment. I can do it in my spare time, and then I can show people in my plant, or I can show my customer what I mean by edge-driven report by exception, lightweight infrastructure. I can do it with their data. That's where I think that's where I think the big value is going to be. Josh, any questions in the queue we need to answer? Any questions for Kudzai? Anything we should touch on? is a Kafka message queue system suitable for use as a UNS? It is. Well, I'll have Kudzai answer this as well, but the answer is it is suitable as a consumer of a unified namespace. So plugging a Kafka message queue system into a UNS and then using it to what we use Kafka for is to take a unified namespace and essentially turn that into time series data for storage into a data lake. That's that, and we use Kafka in the middle at a high level. At a 10,000 foot view, that's what we're using it for. What about you, Kudzai?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really the same use case there, because your unified namespace is your snapshot, but you could have that data, since Kafka can retain data for like 5 days or so.
Yep.
Use it to buffer that data, so it consumes from the unified namespace and then retains that data for consumption by some enterprise applications. So it's a way really of extending the unified namespace, as it were.
Perfect. Josh, anything else on there? What is significantly changed in Opta? Well, in terms of changed, what I would say is there are features that never existed in the Arduino ecosystem other than what was tested in the Portenta line. If you look at like machine control, for example, or the H2, there were concepts that were tested by Arduino in the Portenta line that were really focused on industry. The Opta is the first micro PLC from Arduino. So if you're used to working with Arduino microcontrollers, and I'm shooting educational content on this, and it'll be like a free workshop that you'll be able to just go and watch. I'm going to show the transition between starting out working with a Opta as a microcontroller. You can literally treat it as a microcontroller in the Arduino IDE, but then the transition from microcontroller to PLC using the PLC IDE. But what's changed is this layer of programmable logic laid on top of the Arduino Sketch infrastructure. That's really what's changed. And also it's obviously rated for industry. So it meets all of the industrial ratings, which the standard microcontrollers do not. Kudzai, any feedback from you there?
Yeah, so I think you basically touched all the important points there, really. So I don't have experience with the Portenta, so this is like really my first PLC Arduino line. So I'm yet to find out more about how really this works. So I'm used to using your Uno, your Arduino Duo, all those like low level embedded microcontrollers.
So Portenta, the only difference between, say, Portenta machine control, actually, let's use H2. So the Portenta H2, it's H2, right, Zach? It's the H2. It's a more robust microcontroller. That's what it is. It's a larger board, more I/O, but the manufacturing quality is much higher. It's clear that it's meant to last 20 years in some environment, but developing on it is exactly the same. It just has additional features. It has its own library so that you can connect to all of the inputs and outputs on the H2. Can you build an MQTT publisher in Opta? Yes, easily. I mean, you can use the MQTT, the native MQTT libraries in Arduino Sketch, or you could actually extend. You can take the native library and then you can extend by building in the Sparkplug-B structure. So you can make it a Sparkplug-B node as well. But yes, you can make it a publisher that's native. Really, yeah. And by the way, they sold out all of them in 3 days.
Wow.
Like every single device in Europe and the United States, or North America and in Europe, completely sold out. 3 days. I mean, they literally put on their Twitter all the pallets of them being shipped out. They were like, literally, this is that. There, if you go to Arduino's Twitter feed, there was literally a thing where shipping out the last of the units we had in inventory, and it's like just this big long line of pallets. And by the way, the box is tiny, so think about how many of these go on one pallet. It was crazy. All right, last question for you, Kudzai, before we call it a day. So you're a developer advocate at HiveMQ, Industry 4.0 TV. You're an influencer in this space. What do you have planned at HiveMQ for the rest of the year? What should people be looking out for in terms of stuff you're doing in advocacy for developers? And then what do you have planned, just for yourself outside of HiveMQ?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think mostly for the HiveMQ part of it, I'm going to be mostly focused on really kind of like talking more about Spark Plug, right? And also kind of like really pushing the conversation around. I mean, we spoke about the need to kind of make this also robust, right? The Spark Plug platform. I was talking with someone recently that Spark Plug is so easy and so simple to adopt that people are even willing to go around it just to make it work, because despite its shortcomings, because there isn't any other solution out there. So it's something that really needs to we need to pay attention to and make sure it works for everyone.
Rick
Yeah.
Bellata and I talk about this, right? I didn't mean to cut you off, but I want to get your take on this. One of the things that Rick says, and he's absolutely right, is there's a fundamental issue with the Sparkplug standard is that it's device centric. So it assumes that everything you're building or all the payload structures you are building belong to a device. Now, a device isn't clearly defined. A device could be a sensor, it could be a PLC, it could be a cabinet. A cabinet could be a device, or a device could be a series of things put together. But the way that they build the semantic hierarchy, which is group ID, node ID, device ID, creates limitations in the way that you can structure your payloads. That's one limitation that they have to get away from. I would argue they need to move telemetry centric. They need to move away from devices and to the sensor level, right? And if you go to the sensor level, you can cover everything. But right now, there's a level of abstraction that you cannot get to because of the way the Sparkplug standard is written, including Sparkplug 3, which is the newest version. And then the other big limitation in MQTT is that there's no mechanism for being able to call a method on a payload. So lots of different things. A topic is not an object, so I can't do something like topic.method, pass in an argument to the broker, and then the broker runs a piece of code on that topic and returns a result to the client. That's a basic function that everyone wants, and there's no standard for that. You can develop that. Hive could build that into their broker, but then they wouldn't be MQTT 5 or MQTT 3 compliant if they put that in. And that's something that's missing in the standard, right? Also microservice support, that kind of thing. Is there anything else you think is missing, or what would you like to see in the MQTT standard or in the Sparkplug standard that we don't currently have? Other than those, I'm assuming you agree with those, but
yes, I certainly agree with those. I mean, there's quite a lot of low-hanging fruits. I mean, I don't know if you agree with me. Also, the ability to publish JSON payloads, right?
Yep,
That's
agreed.
also something for me, a low-hanging fruit that could be resolved with Sparkplug.
yeah, right now you can't publish a JSON object. You can publish a string that looks like a JSON, but it's nothing but a dictionary, but it's not an actual object. So on the consumer side, you would have to turn it back into a JSON object so that you could run any of the JSON methods on that object. Right now, you can't actually publish as type JSON. It ends up getting published as type string in the format of JSON, right?
Exactly.
Excellent. All right, Kudzai, any parting thoughts? Anything you want to say to the community, or anything you want them to take home with them before we call it a day?
Yeah, so I mean, just to say thank you to the community. The community has really been supportive, especially for me, my journey, and also yourself, Walker. Thank you. I mean, even if we never got a chance to talk before that, you've always been like, sometimes it gets lonely talking about this IoT, especially back in the days when there was really not a lot of people talking about this stuff. Just knowing that there's someone who validates your message is kind of really important for me. So thank you so much for that also.
And I want to extend the thank you to you. I truth be told, man, I see a lot of content out there. I think is I don't want to say misinformation, but it misleads people sometimes, or sends them down the wrong path, or it confuses the market. And I never get that with you. I mean, you and Tim Wilborn are two of, like, if I recommend any two people to watch in terms of content, it's you and Tim Wilborn. and it's a, hey, you need to watch this guy Kudzai, and hey, you need to watch this guy Tim. You put the two of those together, and you get a great education from them. So anyway, Kudzai, I really appreciate. I'd love to have you back on. I'm going to be on your podcast too, right? Coming up. Okay. Yep. So we're going to kind of, return the favor. I'd love to have you back on. Zach, Vaughn, do you guys have any parting comments, questions, concerns before we call it a day?
Not me. No. We'll see you guys in a few weeks or
right.
next.
Audience, like, subscribe, comment down below, especially the Tesla Investor Day piece. Was that helpful in playing that audio? Is that something we should put in the podcast, not put in the podcast, that type of thing, and have us comment on that kind of stuff? I'd love to get your feedback specifically on that. Please reach out to Kudzai at industry4.0.tv. Go check out the UNS Essentials at HiveMQ's website, and we will see you guys in the next one.